real works of art look as though they were done in joy. Robert Henry, artist and author of the book Art Spirit. This is The Artful Painter, art lessons for artists, collectors, and people who love art. Your art lesson today comes from artist Brian Rutenberg. Brian Rutenberg's paintings radiate the atmospheric haze, the shimmering heat, and the rich colors of the Deep South. He describes himself as a southern landscape painter living in New York. Layers and details of the southern landscape have been peeled back in his paintings, leaving us with the dancing lines and shimmering pools of colors of the Carolina coastal wetlands. As I've gotten to know Brian through his studio visit videos on YouTube and his book, Clear Seeing Place, I've come to expect the unexpected. What you won't hear from Brian are glib, often repeated, feel-good sound bites we've come to expect from motivational books and videos for artists. What you do hear from Brian is his thought-provoking, unconventional wisdom, a wisdom that has been formulated and brewed in the depths of his mind from experience, because day after day, year after year, he has simply shown up to do the hard work of a painter. In this episode, Brian explains what abstraction is. To him, essentially all art is abstraction. However, most of us view it as a style. Brian argues abstraction is not a noun, but instead is a verb. Abstraction is not a style, but rather is a process. Using the tools of abstraction, Brian seeks out the essence of the southern landscape. The result? Beautiful paintings full of movement, color, and atmosphere. My name is Carl Olson, and this is The Artful Painter. So you started studio visits on YouTube back in 2010, I believe it was.
God, I think it has been 8 years. Yeah. And there's six. I just released the 67th last week.
Yeah.
And coming close to 1 million views in total. So it's YouTube has changed everything, Carl. I am fascinated by what it's done for us as artists. Everything is better. You can brushing your teeth is better if you watch something on YouTube. Buying mattresses,
Yeah.
putting together a dresser from IKEA, I go to YouTube. If I need to jump a car, I go to YouTube. Then I pay somebody to jump it, but at least I can learn it. And I think it's also made painting better for all of us. But, in perusing YouTube, there's a lot of stuff about technique and about scholarship and art history. But there was very little, if not nothing, that sort of opens the studio door and takes you into the working life of an exhibiting painter. And what I wanted to do was not to show people my work or to really make it about my work, but to simply make it about my interests, which in a roundabout way is about my work. And to put a chair in front of a camera and stare into it and just tell the truth about what I'm doing and what's going on. And I've learned a few things in the 4 decades I've been painting. And I thought, I could be a better painter if I could try to help other people. I do think it's a reciprocal relationship. We do.
I appreciate it. I think I have watched all 67 videos.
Oh, I haven't.
Well, you made them, right? It's like I've been podcasting since 2010, but I haven't listened to all the episodes other than editing. That's about it. But one of the things I appreciate about it is, for a lot of artists, it is something new. To use these tools like YouTube and podcasting to talk about art and to share, give a look into the inner sanctum there of the artist studio. But I experienced what you said in your book. You asked the question, why do so many painters look as if they're getting a flu shot when talking about their art?
Right.
And I like that.
Yeah, it is a joyful thing. I think it was Robert Henri said in The Art Spirit that all great painting looks like it was made out of joy. I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what he said.
Well, life is a paraphrase, isn't it?
Yes, indeed.
if I had a perfect memory, I don't know that would be such a great thing, because it seems like out of imperfect memories, we construct these wonderful narratives in life. So
I agree, through the lens of our own experience. Yes.
Yeah. You mentioned too that one of the things I like about your approach is there's a lot of repetition.
Yeah.
And I think as a parent, when we teach our children, we inculcate, which means to teach by repetition. And I wondered, does that come from your background as having an interest in being a drummer?
Yes, it does. Very much so. I played drums professionally for about 20 years, all through college, all through high school, and then after. And I learned a great deal about repetition and about the importance of rhythm, not only in music, of course, but in the visual arts, in stand-up comedy, in literature. The idea of repeating something to create a pattern, and then that gives you the option of diverging from that pattern, and then creating a moment of interest or a detonation of energy. I used to listen to Richard Pryor, and I still do, because it teaches me, how jokes are constructed. You establish a pattern with 2, and then you break it with 3. And I remember in art school when teachers would tell me that I needed to grow and evolve. And I've come to learn that those are BS words. I think there's a great deal of poetry in repetition, in doing the same thing over and over again, and then living within those parameters, those limitations. And that allows you to be free and to sort of move around within those walls. I think that's what true freedom is.
Well, that's one of the things I'm struggling with as I learn about art. Is it's all new to me. So it's kind of like getting on that old rusty blue bicycle I used to have, and man, I got stitches and Band-Aids all over my psyche right now trying to learn this stuff. But
but those are the things that will make you glow in the dark later on. And the real secret to all of this, and it's right in front of us all along, is to simply show up every single day if you can. Show up, and you don't have to work and make profound statements, but you have to be there. That's the most important thing, regardless of the results. You just simply start. It doesn't have to be good. Very little of it is good. I have 1,000 square feet in Midtown Manhattan here, and I make a lot of work, but very little of it actually gets out into the world, because a lot of it sucks, but nobody sees it. Doesn't matter.
How do you know that it's good? I mean, when I look at your work, I'm seeing what you present, which is beautiful. I love what you do. But how do you know that, okay, this one works and this one doesn't?
I think it's just sheer flight hours, just sheer experience, having done it for so long, having looked for so long. And I'm a continual student of art history. I spent a good deal of time at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And you eventually start to see there are certain commonalities that make a work of art good. And those are basic things that come from the Greeks and Romans, things like proportion and harmony and clarity, and the treatment of light and dark. And there are certain things that you can work towards within that rule system. And then eventually you just start to know if something if it looks good. I think it was Duke Ellington said, if it sounds good, it is good. And I think it's true in the visual arts. The more you look, the more you learn what looks good. And then if it looks good, it is good.
I think what happens sometimes is we over-intellectualize it, I suppose.
Yes. Well, certainly you don't want to do that while you're working, Carl. Yeah. I think the most deadly, dull thing a painter can do is analyze as they're painting. I think you do, and then you think. You put a mark down, then you put your hands behind your back and you back up about 10 feet and look at it. Then you can analyze it, and then you can come back and make the next change. But don't analyze as you're working. So many painters kill the mark by making the second and third mark, and then eventually it's just dead. Put something down and then step away. That's an important, I think, practice to put into play.
And so it's a very deliberate process.
Yes, it's kind of an informed spontaneity, if that makes any sense. It's deliberate, but it's spontaneous at the same time.
See, that proves my point. What I was unconventional wisdom. I like that. That's my problem, is overcoming, conventional ways of thinking. I've been going through these tutorials. I've been attending workshops. I have been devouring books. Yeah. And I hear these different pontifications, and sometimes it's hard for me to judge. Is this right? This artist says don't use black. Really?
Right. Yeah.
Where does that come from?
I don't know where that was. I don't know if it came out of Hans Hofmann school. Goya used black. That's all the permission you need.
Thank you, Brian. I needed that permission.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a tube of ivory black, Mars black, chromatic black.
Oh, they're delicious colors. One can make beautiful greens by mixing, lemon yellow or cad yellow light with black. Certainly experiment with black, not just to shade colors, but to create, sort of bend other colors in certain directions. And chromatic black is a wonderful Gamblin product. He mixes two colors together to give you the benefit of shading really any color without killing it, without making it dull. It just simply makes it darker in value.
Yeah, very good. When I look at your paintings, though, it seems like, the first impression is they're very colorful, which is true. I mean, most paintings do have color in them, but there's something about the way you approach it that makes certain colors sing, and I'm curious about that. How do you make if I sit down and start doing a painting like that? Well, first of all, it'll never be like a Brian Rutenberg painting, but I don't know that I could, at this point in my education, that I could achieve that kind of fidelity that you have with your paintings.
Oh, I love that word, by the way, fidelity. Color is a trial and error thing for me. I never learned proper color theory. I just simply have experimented for a long, long time, and I know that certain things will work and certain things will not work. But I've never been afraid of actually trying. The worst that'll happen is I'll scrape it off and it ends up on the floor. But one can't have intense colors without having dull colors. So to understand the tertiaries, the mixing of mud, teachers always advise you to stay away from mud or don't make mud. Make mud. Mud is beautiful. It's fascinating to make mud. And then, add white to that mud and see what happens. You get a beautiful, array of grays and taupes and things. And then those colors paired next to a cobalt teal or a cherry pie red can sing, but it's the two working together. Color is never about the single entity, but it's about the combinations of things ringing together. If it's all intense, then it's just like, eating a pack of sweet tarts. It's too much. But if you pair things next to duller things, then you can start to have a little conversation, and you'll see how things will allude to pictorial space, to the elasticity of space, what Hans Hofmann called push and pull. Some colors advance while other colors recede. And it's fascinating to use all of the colors that we have available to us. All of the modern colors, which Gamblin talks about, the synthetic colors, the phthalos and the quinacridons, all those beautiful transparents, they can sing and they can do things that nothing else can. And it's all there for us.
No limited palettes.
I do practice limited palette, but the way that I work is I have several palettes going at the same time, and I'll work within just one or two colors and then a range of tones of that color per palette. And then I have a separate palette for blacks, grays, umbers, siennas, things like that.
Right.
And I'll transfer those duller colors to my more intensely hued colors, and I'll work on a range of subtle variations of those. So I have a lot of things going all at the same time. Pretty unconventional, pretty tailored to the way that I work, but that's just the way that I like it. And a lot of the mixing is done right on the canvas, as Matisse advised.
Right.
Put a couple colors down and simply put them together right in front of you.
And see what happens.
Yeah.
Do you ever just do you approach a painting with say, today I want to focus on this tint, this shade, this color family, or is it more of an intuitive process?
It's completely intuitive. I come in, going back to the rituals we talked about, I have a very strict work ritual. I wake up, I try to walk my kids to school. I go to the gym for 20 minutes. I have oatmeal and coffee with my buddies at the diner, and then I get here and I spend about the first hour from about 9:30 to 10:30 on paperwork. And while I'm writing, I have my computer set up so that I can see the wall where the paintings are that I worked on the previous day. And as I work or correspond, I can start to think about what I might do that day. And then once I stand in front of the painting, I just, it's weird. It's like the cognitive part shuts off in a way, and it becomes kind of my lizard brain. And I just simply start, and things will sort of tell you what they need you to do. I think if you remember the old Mel Brooks routine, I think the 2,000-year-old man, the reverse side of that has some line that says, listen to your broccoli because it'll tell you how to eat it.
Who likes broccoli? Yeah.
Yes. So I listen to my broccoli.
Very good. Yeah. So when you're faced with that blank canvas, is there anything that you do or before even applying that first stroke of paint?
Yeah. In front of the white canvas, I stand about 6 inches in front of it. I take both hands and I skim in circular motions, probably 1/8 of an inch above the surface, just barely touching it so that the heat from my hand somehow creates heat within the weave of the canvas. And I just sort of very, very lightly skim it. And that creates kind of a tactile correspondence between my body and the skin of the gesso on the paint. That's the way I begin. It sounds nutty, but that's how I do it.
It sounds like a calibration of sorts.
Yes. And it is kind of an animalistic, it's heat, it's rhythm and heat.
Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about labels that are applied to the styles of art. And the reason this is coming to my mind is, I love all kinds of arts. I just, there's so many different things, and I can't limit myself to just one thing to appreciate. But yet I've attended workshops, I've seen articles, I've read. There's a kind of a disparagement toward one school of painting versus the others. Like, there was a huge backlash, it seemed like, against realistic painting, realism. And then on the flip side, the realistic movement was really back, killing the abstract, putting abstract painting down. I'd like to get your thoughts on that. What do you think about this schism between the two realms of painting styles?
Well, I think that art history is littered with revolts against one thing to create another thing. Courbet revolted against romanticism and idealism, and created realism. And then on and on. Picasso, they talk about line and structure, versus Matisse, which is emotion and color. But you see that those are tools used by critics and by writers to sort of be able to corral or describe elements of style and to put them into scholarly terms. Those are all important things. But to a painter standing behind a door in a studio, I don't think any of that applies. I think everything has to be enough. I think that it's a buffet, and that one can pick and choose a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and put it together in a way that speaks to your heart and gives you a voice. I don't think anyone has to worry as a painter about those things. All art is abstraction. It's artificial. It's a painting of a jug is not real. It's artificial. And to do that, you have to abstract it, which means to remove. You simply remove it from the real world and you put it into the world of art. You bend the laws of nature to fit the laws of art. So we are always abstracting. And then some things may look more representational than others, but it's a tricky thing because often what looks very real is the most artificial. And sometimes things that look artificial can be the most real, if that makes sense. So I don't worry about labels. I consider myself a landscape painter, and then I try to narrow that down as minuscule as possible. So a landscape painter. I was born in the South. I live in New York City. So I consider myself a Southern landscape painter who lives and works in New York City. And by narrowing it to the pinpoint of a diamond, I find that I have great latitude to work within that. Some things may appear more realistic than others, but then at the same moment, I may abstract something and bend it toward the artifice, toward the artificial. I think the word abstraction has been a problem for me for a long time. I think it is a process. It's not a style. And I think too many people say, I want to paint abstracts, which doesn't make any sense to me. It's like saying you want to eat cooking. It's not a verb. It's not a noun. It's a verb. It's a process. So to abstract means to remove. But don't have in your mind, I want to make an abstraction. That doesn't make any sense. Then you're just pushing a paint around in a way that looks like art. And that's the worst thing you can do. Just simply have your interests and then begin from those interests. And wherever it takes you, if you need to abstract more, that's great. If you don't, that's also great. But at least it's honest.
What do you mean it looks like art?
A lot of times what is billed as abstracts in galleries is just simply people moving paint around in a way that looks like art. It's representational paintings of abstraction, if that makes sense. It's copying styles of other people who copied other styles before them. If you need to abstract, it has to be a verb. It's a process. So don't think of it as abstract. Think of it as a landscape painting that has been abstracted.
Okay, I think I'm getting this wrapped around my head. So. Sounds like what you're doing is you're taking a subject or an idea and you're reducing it down. You're taking away pieces until you get to the bare essence of what it is that you want to say in that painting.
That's closer to what I'm saying. I don't mean to say that paintings that are abstracted or abstract paintings are devoid of thought. On the contrary, it is an intellectual endeavor. But the process itself, abstract expressionism was a period, and then it faded away. So I don't consider myself an abstract expressionist. Impressionism came, and then post-impressionism after that. I'm not an impressionist either. I just simply take the world that I know, the things that I know, and I use the tools of abstraction, which is a very, very old concept. The ancient Egyptians were abstract. And I remove it from the recognizable and sort of reduce it down to just colors, forms, lines, those things. So it's the process, not the end result. I never want to paint an abstract painting. I think people maybe confuse it with non-objective painting, which is so severely reduced. It is just shapes, colors, and lines, which is very, very powerful. But in terms of the kind of painting I do, which is hotter, which is more evocative, more gestural, I don't think of them as abstractions. I think of them as landscape paintings that have been abstracted. Yeah,
it kind of reminds me of like when I lay down in the grass on a summer day with my grandchildren, and we're looking up at the clouds, and I look to my granddaughter and I say, "What do you see?" And she doesn't say a cloud. She says a rabbit or a turtle.
Exactly. Exactly. Like when did green become grass? When did blue become sky? It's interesting how we grow up and we sort of see things analytically and more narrowly and without the poetry and the spaciousness that a child sees things. I remember my old teacher would say that an eye not told what to see sees more. And I've always remembered that.
Oh, that's beautiful. See, that's a thing I struggle with because I had such a left brain job. I was a software developer for 30 something years. So, it's a very different way of seeing things.
Yes.
It's a scary world for me right now.
Yes. Yeah. But painters are the original storage and retrieval systems. We put things down, we store them, we wipe them away, and then we retrieve them. So we invented it.
I like that. Well, see, that's what I say. People say, well, why are you taking up oil painting after you did digital for so long. I said, well, I like to paint each pixel.
Yeah, essentially, yeah, it is slowness. And that's, it's fascinating the difference between like a digital image or a photograph. In a photograph, it's the same time in one corner of the photograph that it is in the other. But in a painting, it's a different time with every kiss that the brush gives the canvas. So you have this beautiful like deli sandwich of different moments in time all stacked together in this dense object, humming all together. It's a really slow process, and it helps us to see and think slowly, which I think is why painting is more important than ever.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. One of the problems I faced with filmmaking is in modern films was the frenetic editing and pacing of movies today.
Yeah.
And the movies I liked were the ones where I could linger in the scene. Yes. I could peer behind and follow the eye, the wandering eye. The best directors to me were the ones that had the wandering eye. You'd see the actor's eye, but you don't see what he sees, but yes. Then it's revealed.
Right. So, and the idea of looking at someone who doesn't know you're looking at them is fascinating to me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Watching people like that's this is a fascinating concept to me. And I also, one of the things I hear over and over and over again, you must tell a story. And sometimes I don't want the story. I just put me in the scene and let me.
Right.
Does that make
painting,
sense? Yeah.
It makes total sense to me when I don't think there's any such thing as narrative painting because painting is a static object and painting is about experience, not the recreation of experience. I don't think a painting can tell a story. It can suggest a series of events, but it can't do what film or literature can do better. I think it's more akin to poetry. It's a bowl of experiences, all sort of, compressed together, momentary experiences, which are in the present tense. A painting is always in the present tense.
If I look at a painting that was done by, say, Thomas Moran or Rembrandt or any of the great masters, they painted it at that moment, but yet when I'm looking at that painting and looking at that frame, I feel that I'm there in the moment, watching it, experiencing it.
Yes. Yeah. And you are.
Yeah.
Because and think about this too. It's not just it's not just in a thinking thing. It's an animal thing because you are standing in the same spot that they did when they painted it, a couple of inches in front of the picture, the same place they stood when they put each greasy little skin of paint on that canvas. You're in the same space. So 100 years or 150 years can evaporate. If you're looking at Van Gogh, for instance, and you're standing there seeing it as he saw it, you're in the same light that he was as he put each skin of color down. It's a very tender, direct communication painting. It is intimate. It's one-to-one.
Humans just really want to label things. We want to call this that style, this that style. And I was thinking of a musician friend of mine. His name is Patrick O'Hearn. He played for Frank Zappa and Missing Persons, and he's put out a number of solo albums. And it used to frustrate him that his albums, his solo works, would be thrown into the New Age bin of the record store.
Yeah.
But that's how the music gets categorized. But there's nothing New Age about his music. It's just they couldn't figure out where to put it, so that they stuck it right there. How do you handle that? People wanting to categorize your work or put that particular label on it.
Well, I do. There's an interesting point where we have to separate the studio work from the business of being an artist. In the business part, an artist does have to brand themselves. It's very important. And they've been doing that for centuries. It's not a new thing.
That's
it's
true.
just more in the consciousness. But I think it's very important for a painter to say, I am a Southern landscape painter who lives and works in New York City. That's what I do. That's what makes me special. That's what can be marketed, to use a dirty word, so to speak. But it's important in the business part that you do understand those labels. That people, in order to market and promote things, there does have to be some sort of a category to put it in. You can't say, you're a painter of life, or, you paint everything, because that's not true. Or say that you love everything, because that's not true either. You can't love everything. You can love certain things and then use those to compress down and to put into your voice. That's the most important thing, is to speak from your heart, to use your voice, because that's what we want to see. I don't want the New York Times, when I look at a painting, I want one person's creepy little world compressed down to the size of a diamond, because that's what'll make me a better person. That's what will give me lucidity, is to peer into your world. Or, as we talked about Van Gogh before, or Thomas Moran, I want to see through their eyes. That's what makes me a human being in that moment. I don't care about, there's so many paintings that are just too smart. I think I see them in galleries all the time.
Too smart.
Yeah, they're too smart. They're trying to do too many things. Do one thing, but just do it over and over and over again. But it's totally okay to brand yourself, and to if someone wants to call me an expressionist, or painterly painter, those are all fine things. But I brand myself as well.
Yeah, you have a very specific and very focused message. It isn't broad. And I guess that is something that a lot of people who want to get into art, or who are artists, we want to experiment with a little bit of everything. And from a business standpoint, being all over the place probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No. It's okay to experiment with things, but that's the studio part. That's in behind your closed door. But when you put your work out there, when you present it to a dealer or a collector, you want it to be as honed and as specific as possible. You want to show a cohesive body of work that has a single train of thought that carries through each picture. And then there's variations on that single thread. You don't want it all over the place. I think that looks sloppy, and it looks confusing. There has to be extreme clarity, and that's why it's so important to limit your perspectives. I think limited perspectives is our best thing. I think it was I want to say Count Basie who said that the wise musicians are those who play what they can master. So don't do everything, just do one thing, but do it over and over and over and over again.
Well, how did you find that place in the way you paint?
I tried a lot of different things. I've been doing it for a long time. I tried to copy a lot of other painters, and then I realized that everything I got wrong was my style. And then I started to just hone it down more narrow. And then I realized that the things that my work is ostensibly about are the things that were right in front of me all along. In my youth, along the coast of South Carolina, in Myrtle Beach and in Charleston. And that very special, unique landscape of humidity and slow-moving ancient rivers and Spanish moss, those are all the things that taught me how to see. And my life has just been a variation on seeing in that very specific way. So I have that well, which I dip back into again and again, because it is my heart. It's the way that I see. It's the way that I can tell the truth. And if I can express that truth to the viewer, in a very, very intimate way, no grand statements, then I think I can speak to somebody and give them a chance to look through my eyes. And that's essentially what art is. It's you're peering through someone else's eyes. You're walking around in their shoes.
Oh, wow. Well, you mentioned viewer. I was just thinking about your last video. You posed a question in that video that I enjoyed. How did you put it? You made the point about, we all want the public to like our work.
Right.
And when they don't, it's, it just sends us in a tailspin.
Yeah.
And then you say, this is why you should paint for one person, your ideal viewer. And I have to admit, in that moment, my brain goes sparking and it says, I know what he's going to say. He's going to say you, but that's not what you said.
No, that's my wife. Katie. Yeah.
Let's expand on that. Your ideal viewer. Why is it important to think about who your ideal viewer is?
I'll start with a quote from Stephen King, who said that all novels are letters aimed at one person. And I think it's important for a painter to paint for one person. And it has to be a person in whom you have the utmost trust, and a person who loves you and knows you intimately. Because then when that person looks at your work and responds to it, they will speak truthfully, but they'll speak from love, from genuine love. And I think that is what every painter needs. We all want to be loved. We are damaged goods painters. We make stuff and then we say, do you like it? Do you like it? Please like me. So you want someone that truly likes you, someone that knows me, and that's my wife, Katie. And I know that she'll look at my work when I show her a new painting, and she'll make intelligent comments. And then the best part is when she snuggles up into my chest and she looks at me with those big chocolate eyes, and that can move mountains, which is what I said in the video. And that's the best review I can get. That's the only review I need. Yeah. It's important to patronize artists, to tell us that you love us and that you love our work, because we're all one step away from that cosmic banana peel.
Yep, there you go. It reminds me when I was taking trumpet lessons from an Atlanta Symphony Orchestra member, and I hadn't taken maybe 3 lessons, and he says, "Carl, you have no talent. Go home. I'm not teaching you anymore." And I was devastated. I never picked up the trumpet again.
Okay, there you go. And you may have been the next Wynton Marsalis. We'll never know that.
I'll never know that now.
That schmuck. I've been through hundreds of critiques in art schools and lecture halls, et cetera. And I've seen painters, artists, teachers that tear students to pieces. And I've always thought, what a terrible, joyless thing to do that. To give someone encouragement and to find the merit in what they're doing. You can still talk about things that could be done better, and they always can be done better. I learn that every day. But point out the things that are good. Be kind. Those are the things that artists need to hear, because then they can take that kindness and they can, I think, put it into their work and hopefully express that later. I can't stand bitter, competitive, ironic, those kinds of things. They leave me very, very dissatisfied. I want a certain generosity when I look at a painting. And the best paintings are the most generous. It's true over and over and over again. So that's the kind of painter I want to be. And that's the thing I try to express in the videos, that it is that kindness and generosity are so very important.
I like that. Sometimes people don't always respond to it, but I remember one time I had my office up in Atlanta, and I would go for a walk, and everybody just has their heads down as they're walking, which is counterintuitive because you think of Atlanta, Southern hospitality and all that, but it's not quite that way, So
or getting hit by a bus.
yeah. So I tried this experiment. I said, you know what? I'm going to say hi to every person I walk by.
Yeah.
And then they all moved to the other side of the road. But hey, I felt good because I was friendly to them. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. It's important. One kind act the first thing in the morning makes your whole day better. I'll give up a seat on the subway. I'll hold a door for someone. I'll say good morning. They're very simple little things you can do. I think it makes you a better painter.
Well, I like this idea of, there's no place really for this, harsh criticism, but I think we do need to be molded to do the right things, right? So,
yes.
So when I saw this video and you were talking about this, I really identified, because my wife is similar. You hear a lot of, or I've read a lot in the books and the publications, with artists talking about this. And I truly thought when you made that comment that you should paint for one person, it was going to be you. I thought that was going to be it. And that really wasn't your answer there. And I thought, wow, this is not nice. This is not a selfish view. It's you're involving other people. There's an empathetic relationship there. And with my wife, she'll point out things. She'll look at my painting. She'll say what she likes. I just did one, and she looked at it and said, "Well, I really like this." But I could tell there was something that was holding her back. And so I said, well, no, it's okay, honey. I'm not going to go and go into a fetal position. let me know what's wrong.
Yeah.
And she said it. And I admit, inwardly, I felt a severe disappointment that, good grief, I missed that. I did miss that. But what an act of kindness that she told me, because I could go and correct it before I show the world what I just did.
And it comes from a true, honest place of love and affection, not a place of bitterness and competitiveness. I think that's the difference. Of course, there needs to be criticism, and one can seek it out at certain points. There'll be periods where I won't show anyone anything I'm doing, and then a period where I let them out into the world. And some people love them and some people hate them. That doesn't matter to me, but I know that at least I've spoken from my heart. And when I need someone to look at it, I always go to my ideal viewer. That's who I paint for.
Beautiful.
Makes it easy.
I love that thought. Anyway, I thought that was a very cool thing that you did in the video talking about that. So thank you. The other thing is you mentioned something in your book, Clear Seeing Place, which is a fantastic resource for artists. It's not really a how-to, but it's something that makes you think outside common, what most people will do as common sound bites. But you address the subject of decoration, and some artists bristle at that term. And I just read the book Mad Enchantment by Monet, and his grand finale, what did he call it? The Grand Decoration.
Yes. Yeah. That word, like the color black, I think somehow it went off the rails in art schools, that somehow to be decorative means that you're making refrigerator magnets or placemats, that you're just dalliance, putting things down, to make corporate art or something like that. That's not what I'm talking about. All art is decoration. Decoration means to put visual elements together in a way that stirs the emotions and delights the eye. And that's our only organ that we have to work with as painters, is the eye. You want to delight the eye of your viewer. I don't see why we would do this if that wasn't the case. Picasso spoke of decoration. Matisse spoke of it. The 18th century Rococo painters, they decorated churches and palaces, all to delight the eye and to bend space and to move the heart. Those are all good things. To make a decorative work of art is really, really hard to make it good. So I don't know why people see that as a pejorative thing. It doesn't mean it's simplistic and trite, but to decorate means to make something look good, and that's what we try to do.
Yeah. Well, what's the most when you think about the effect that your art has had on people? Is there a story or an anecdote that you can relate that really touched your heart about how your work affected other people?
Well, one of the most satisfying comments that I get repeatedly is that people who don't respond to looser abstracted painting or abstraction, if they want to use that word, see exactly what I'm trying to express, and they feel as if they're in a place that looks familiar to them, even if they've never been to, the banks of the Santee River in South Carolina. Which is deep inside of me, those things, they feel like they've been there. And that's the greatest compliment I can have, is when someone looks at the work and recognizes something. And that's that powerful moment in a work of art. That's what all great art does, is it lets us recognize something we've never seen before. And that, if I can do that, that's a reason to skip down the street in the morning. That's very hard to do. So that's the most satisfying comment, is when people say they recognize something even though they've never seen it before.
I would love to see these paintings of yours in person. I have to admit I haven't. I've only seen them on the web and in the videos, and so it's not the same experience as seeing them in real life. But I'm grateful that you share them that way, because otherwise I would not be able to see them anytime
and
soon.
I try to show in the videos surfaces from the side and from different angles to show you the density of the surface and the way that the paint interacts. It's a lot like cooking shows, which I love to watch. It's meant to be sensual and technical and philosophical, and all those things. It's like a cooking show, but it's not food.
Well, it would be like a cooking show with my grandmother. She made the best biscuits in the whole world. Biscuits that would kill you. They were made out of lard, and they would literally float out of the pan.
Oh my gosh!
And you'd have to grab them before they went to the ceiling. They were fantastic. Now, if you did a cooking show with her, she would never be able to do step by step by step. You'd have to watch your hands knead the dough, mix the lard, shape the biscuit. And that's what I sense when I watch your videos. I'm watching you touch the painting, you grabbing scoops of paint and putting it on the canvas. And I'm thinking, my, what fun he's having doing that.
Yeah, I'm just a Southern grandmother in a 6'3" man's body.
Making lard biscuits with big pieces of canvas.
You got it.
Man, I love it. I love it. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about your people who are in any trade, whether they're a construction worker or a fisherman, an artist. We like to talk about the tools that we use. Could you tell us a little bit about the materials and the approach that you take in constructing your paintings?
I have a great disrespect for my tools, which is why whenever I get a new brush, the first thing I do is snap it in half. No, that's true. And the reason I do that is because I have such enormous respect for the viewer that I feel like I have to have disrespect for the tools. The tool is not a magic wand. It's a stubby stick with horsehairs on the end. And I want to make it, like something that just puts down greasy marks. I don't want any magic in it whatsoever. It's a physical, very unromantic, unglamorous thing. I'm applying skins of paint to a surface. Hopefully they will take off and be magic later. But while I'm doing them, it's a very kind of a mechanical thing, which is why I study all types of work. I love to watch house painters and car mechanics. There's a great book by Studs Terkel called Work, and he interviews waitresses and construction workers, and they talk about the tools of work. So I've always been fascinated. Like when the mailman comes to our apartment, I look at his bag and I look at all the layers in his bag and the different pouches and all the rubber bands around the arm holder, and that these tools are there to make the job flow easier. So the best thing a painter can do is look beyond the art supply store. Go to Home Depot, look at hardware tools. Go to the bakery store, look at cake icing application tools. Anything is a tool if it makes an honest mark. So I have a whole bevy of tools in my studio, which you would never know as a painter. I have surgical tools. I have a women's wig. I have a shovel. I have an old fish tank that I can use to pull paint across the surface. Cardboard, old credit cards, all sorts of different things to put marks down.
What does the wig do?
It just gives you these beautiful sort of hairy marks.
I would have never in a million years thought about that, but that's good. Think out, really be thinking about how these tools can lay down marks.
That's all we have is marks. Back to the decorative. All we have is visual material. Yeah. So how many tools can you use to get what you're feeling, from your brain down to your hand? It doesn't have to be a fine sable paintbrush. It can be, your elbow, which I do.
So I won't find you in a art forum where everybody is talking about the finer aspects of this brand of brush versus this brand of brush and that style of brush and that style of brush.
No, I'd much rather be like in bowling supplies or fish in the stream.
Yeah. Well, that's what I love to go in Ace Hardware and look at the old bristle brushes and things like that and just experiment. They're cheap, you can buy.
They're cheap, but they're the best sometimes too.
They make fascinating marks. So I love love playing with that. So this appeals to me.
Yeah.
So no, but you're putting enormous amounts of paint on large scale paintings. What kind of structure or substrate are you using to create that? Is that a canvas?
Yeah.
Linen? Yeah.
Yep. So all the stretchers are custom built for me by a company out in Brooklyn. They are aluminum stretchers, which they've switched to now because they're sturdier, they don't warp, and they're a little bit lighter. Yeah, they don't shrink, and they're lighter than was it poplar? I guess they used before. Mm-hmm. They are stretched, and they are. I use very heavyweight Belgian linen, and it's double oil primed, which means it's primed, then it's sanded, then it's primed again, and then sanded again. Then it's delivered to me. A whole range of sizes, and that's the structure which I work on. I like the linen because it's a heavy tooth. I like to see the weave of the canvas because I sand a lot, and I'll use heavyweight sandpaper, and sometimes I'll get it all the way back down to where it's just stained linen again. You know, all the paint has been sort of sanded off, and then I go back, and it creates a beautiful distressed surface. Yeah. I use very heavy linen also because I do use, as you noted, heavy areas of paint, sometimes up to 3 inches thick in some areas. And it does, pull weight on the substructure. So it has to be sturdy to begin with.
How do you transport something like that to where it's going to be installed and displayed? The gallery has people that do all that for me. So the things go out, then they go to Long Island City, they get framed, and then they get transported to wherever the show is. It's always good to have people.
Well, yeah, it's a whole other business. And in the old days, of course, I did all that myself, but and everything was crooked and kind of sloppy and stuff. But now it's good to have professionals that do it better than I.
Well, Brian, I deeply appreciate you taking the time to talk with me on The Artful Painter. I could talk for hours, but we just don't have enough time to do all of that. But I would really recommend that folks check out your book, Clear Seeing Place. I know it's been out, about 3-4 years, but it's timeless. The information that's in it is timeless.
Thank you.
What's the best place for people to go and find out about you?
The best place would be you can start at my website, which is brianrutenbergart.com. And then from there, you can see galleries around the country. You can also get access to the YouTube videos and other books and catalogs and things that are available. Or you can, if you want to go straight to the videos, just type in my name, Brian Rutenberg Studio Visits, on YouTube, and then subscribe to my channel, and then you will get alerts when new videos come out, which is about every other month. And I am working on a new book, which we plan to release in the spring of 2020, and it will be a full color monograph, hardcover, but it will be written in a similar way as Clear Seeing Place, which is little essays written by me about my work and my practice.
Nice. I can't wait to see that. That'll be a definite addition to my library.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I think hopefully this has given people an insight into the way you think and how you view art making. And I do highly recommend that folks go check out your YouTube channel. You need to set aside a weekend and a large coffee machine or Keurig machine and just take it in.
Yeah, I get emails from all over the world, and there are clubs. People have clubs, and they drink hot coffee, as I advised in the beginning, and they binge watch like Netflix, which delights me to no end.
Yeah, it's great. It's good education. It makes you think in ways that, I don't know. I mean, I'm not putting down other books and stuff like that, but it does. It's a different way of thinking.
All of us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's just this is what I do, and this is how I do it. And if I can be of use, that's why we do this. So I hope to be of use to others, and this is the way I do it, through social media.
Well, a guy that likes cheeseburgers can't be bad.
Thank you.
All right, we'll talk to you later, Brian.
All right, Carl. Thanks.
Wow, what a great conversation with Brian Rutenberg. I am so happy he took the time to sit down with me and talk about art, especially his art and his thought processes. As no doubt, as you listen to that episode, you began to understand what I meant by unconventional wisdom. He really does think about things in a way that challenges our deep-seated notions of art and all the processes involved and that sort of thing. I really appreciate him sharing that. If you'd like to hear more about the way he thinks about art making, you can check out his YouTube channel, search for Brian Rutenberg. I'll have a link in the episode notes. Also, his book, Clear Seeing Place, I have a link for that as well. Speaking of listening, you can listen and subscribe to The Artful Painter in a number of different ways. It's just amazing. I've been podcasting for almost 10 years now. I started off with the Artful Camera podcast before, back in the day, it was called Digital Convergence. But anyway, things have changed so much. It's so much easier to listen to shows like this. You can subscribe to this one in Apple Podcast. You can do it in Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, radio.com, Radio Public, Spotify, and even YouTube. It's surprising to me how many people actually listen to this audio-only podcast on a video platform, YouTube. It doesn't matter to me. If it's easier for you to do it that way, I think it's great. In fact, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel by going to YouTube and searching for Carl Olson TV. I will make it easy for you. There is a link to my YouTube channel in the episode notes for this show. Before we close out, I do want to mention to you something I've been doing. It's a little project that's been fun. I have been creating my own sketchbooks. I got the idea from Scott Christensen back in January when I went to his demo. He showed off a custom-bound tan craft paper sketchbook. I don't know what the size of it is. I don't know what the dimensions were, but it was good size. It was kind of a wide format, and I liked it. I thought, well, this is pretty cool. That tan paper makes a nice middle tone for sketching, for using ink brushes, ink pens, or even oil paint. or Sharpie pens. It's a great surface to sketch. So when I saw that, I decided, you know what, I've got to make one of those. So I have a binding machine. I have a paper cutter. So I ordered some of the craft paper similar to what he uses, and I bound my own notebook. And then I got a little whimsical with it. I decided, you know what, I've got some of this Cavallini Italian retro print paper. I'm going to make my own unique cover. Well, the next thing I know is I have several people asking, would I make them one of these sketchbooks? So that demand led to me to creating a store on my website at carlolson.tv. So if you go to carlolson.tv, you'll see a tab there. It's my store. It says Sketchbook Store. Click on that and you'll see some of the sketchbooks that are available. So I hope you enjoy it. I'm not going to get rich off of it, but it's a great way to support this podcast. If you want to do that, that would be great. I would very much appreciate it. I really enjoy getting listener feedback. I continue to get it, and I very much am grateful to you for doing that. In fact, this one comes from, I believe, Michael Saunders, and this is what he said. He said, "Good morning, Carl. I'm happy to say I found your podcast. In fact, these are the first podcasts I've ever listened to. I want to thank you for introducing your audience to some amazing artists. I, like you, am a late bloomer, artistically speaking. I began in my mid-40s, and now 10 plus years later, I'm still at it. I consider myself a weekend hobbyist at best, creating oil paintings from my photos. My basement is my studio. I've recently added plein air to the mix. What a humbling experience that is. Thanks again. I look forward to hearing more of your podcast. Have a great day." Wow, Michael, thank you so much for that. Yeah, I know what it means to be a late bloomer with this, but it's never too late. So it's great that you've gotten started. Looks like you've got 10 years under your belt, so you're way ahead of me. So that's great. And a fellow basement artist. I like that. So thank you for that. And I wish you the best as you also add outdoor painting to the mix there. So I appreciate it. By the way, if you would like to drop me a line, it never gets old. It just doesn't. Drop me a line. Go to carlolson.tv. You'll see a tab there that says contact. Click on that. There's a very easy form to fill out. That's the best way to reach me. So if you do it that way, I'll be sure to get it. Thank you for listening to The Artful Painter. It's your turn. Grab your brushes, go out there and paint something amazing. I'll see you in the next episode.
Picture on the TV.